Hello, Gary Rogers here. Welcome to the Spiritual Heritage Channel. Today I'm wanting to talk to you about a Wesleyan Methodist missionary, James Watkin. James Watkin was sometimes referred to as the St. Paul of the South Pacific. In 1830, Watkin and a group of other missionaries departed England from Gravesend. As they departed, the King of England, George IV, took off his hat and saluted them with it until the ship had gone out of sight. Watkin first came to New Zealand, where he learnt the Te Reo Maori language for several months. He then went with his family to Tonga. In Tonga, on the 23rd of July 1834, the Holy Spirit fell on a congregation as they were listening to a Tongan man preaching. This had a great impact on Tonga. It was like the day of Pentecost in the book of Acts. Impacted by this was the king of the island of Haupai. This was King George, who eventually became the king of the whole of Tonga. He was slain in the spirit, as we say these days. This is where the Holy Spirit comes upon a person and they lay incapacitated. He was in this condition for 3 days and 3 nights. There were many thousands of conversions, and by the end of 1835, Watkin had baptised over 3,000 people. In 1837, Watkin confessed to a colleague that he had an affection for his Tongan maid. The Wesleyan Missionary Society responded by sending him back to Sydney with his wife and family. They stayed there for 3 years. In 1839, the Otago chiefs Karatai and Tairoa went to Sydney to appeal for a missionary. At the same time, Johnny Jones, a whaling entrepreneur who had a whaling station at Waikouaiti, which is modern-day Karitani in Otago, also wanted to bring a missionary to the South Island, to his whaling community. And so Watkin and Hannah and their family, they had 5 children at that stage, went to Waikouaiti in Otago. It was very difficult for Watkin and his family when they arrived. They received no communication, no supplies from the Wesleyan Missionary Society in Sydney for 5 months. They had to live on cockles and cabbage tree. They had no supplies like paper and slates and books for writing. When he got here, he found that the local Maori people couldn't understand the Te Reo that he had learnt in the North Island. This was because they had a different dialect. It was more guttural. Watkin had to set to and establish the new vocabulary. Also, he was depressed about his moral failing in the past, and it was like his preaching was ineffectual. There were no conversions during this early period. This is one of the things he wrote, and you get an idea of how depressed he really was. My soul loathes this country. I am sick of the place and of the people, and low in body, low in mind, unhappy in my experience, and unsuccessful in my efforts. And regarding his lack of self-forgiveness that he struggled with, if my brethren had decreed me a lighter punishment, what days of punishment it would have saved me, and I might have been more useful than I had been or hoped to be in this part of the world. I often wish I'd gone to England, where though my pain and shame would have been intense, it would have been of a briefer countenance. But Watkin kept going. He kept teaching Maori, particularly chiefs. 2 years later, Christmas 1842, he had his first true conversion. By mid-1843, Watkin said, "It's as if the whole of New Zealand is receiving the gospel from end to end." By the end of 1843, he'd baptised 200 people. Things have changed. He'd experienced a spiritual awakening. The Holy Spirit had come. God had answered in spite of his difficulties. This story is interesting to me because it tells us of the importance of hanging in there with God when things don't seem to be going our way, to trust God in spite of the circumstances. Watkin kept going. And I don't know what situation you may be in today. Maybe you're struggling with things and it's hard to see light at the end of the tunnel. But God has a plan for you and a hope and a future. And he wants us all to hang in there in faith with him. I hope this story has been an encouragement to you. There are other stories on the Spiritual Heritage channel that might also be an encouragement to you if you would take the time to look at those. Thank you for listening.